the way, while I do these announcements and while we're doing the mic checks is a great time to ask questions because you stack those questions up and then we start jumping into it. So right after these announcements, we're going to start the conversation. From 7 to 8, we're answering general questions. And then from 8 to 9, we have specific questions. So we talk about one specific subject from 8 to 9 and a little longer on Saturdays. And so today we're going to talk about education. Every Friday we talk about education. Saturday we talk about education. There's a lot of educators that are figuring things out and they're in this group. There's educators that are trying to figure it out and they're in this group and attending. So we're all trying to figure out what to do with the predicament that we're all in and how to make some lemonade out of lemons. Every day is different. Monday is kind of a wild card day. We talk about whatever makes sense on that Monday. Tuesday is audio. Wednesday is cameras. Thursday is special guest. So those are kind of the breakdown of what we have here. If you like this and you want to share it with other people, don't share your own link. That will mean that they will join as you. So share the link that I just posted into the new chat, and so you can use that to share it with friends or put it wherever you want. Anyway, that's it. Chris, did we, while I was talking, did we collect any questions? Do we have anything?
We definitely have questions. And
very good.
And there's some good ones. First one.
And if you can, by the way, if you're asking new questions, and I just talked about education, the second hour is education. If you can put EDU : and then your question, that'll tell Chris that we should keep that for the second hour. All right, go ahead.
It makes it so much easier.
So much easier.
Jeff Francis says, on the ATEM Mini, I'm trying to do a simple lower thirds from Keynote, white text over black. Should I do a luminance key with the upstream keyer or the downstream keyer?
So the advantage of the upstream keyer, the advantage of the downstream keyer, is that you can record a clean feed. So the reason downstream is useful is that there's a clean output that's available. I don't know, with the ATEM Mini, I don't know if you're using the ATEM Mini. I didn't even know that the ATEM Mini had an upstream key. Anyway, so you have a downstream output or an upstream. There you go. So you're trying to, there you go. So and so the main thing is I think with an ATEM Mini, the way the outputs work, I don't know if it really matters whether you use an upstream or downstream key because it's not.
That's the upstream.
Does it look different?
That's the downstream.
I can't, let me see. It shouldn't make any difference in the quality because it's both a Luma key that's there, I believe. So and I can't see a difference, at least when I'm looking at it through my screen. So the main thing is that the black, the white over black is easy. That lower third is easy. It's where you get into black over black for a Luma key. And the way you do that is you just make sure that when you're in whatever app, what are you using, Photoshop or are you using Affinity? What are you using to build the lower third, Jeff?
Those are Keynote.
Oh, Keynote, that's right. So if you make your blacks no darker than 15% black in Keynote, they will key over it as well. Now you only able to use sharp edges, or harder edges, but this is a very old fashioned 90s key, which is just 80s. It was in the 90s too. We had when I was at Prime Sports Network, we did Luma keys.
Back to like 70s.
And we still see it in events that, they don't, they're like, oh, no one has key fill. So they do that. So yeah. But you can get away with that. But if you stay with lighter colors, it's really easy. And you can actually get relatively soft edges, with that. And that's how we started. I did hundreds of shows with Keynote, just rolling in, rolling out with it. The challenge really is that you don't have really random access to the images. So that's where something like MIDI, MITTI might be it'll do both key fill, but it'll also give you a little bit more random access, into being able to grab different things to push lower thirds. Go ahead, Chris.
Just for a little historical reference, black used to be 7.5%, 7.5 IRE. And super black is what we would call it, was when you could go down to 0. And a lot of gear wouldn't put out anything below 7.5. Sometimes you'd have to enable super black. But by enabling super black, you could lay something off to tape where the key point was going to be at 0. Your TV black, which was 7.5. 7.5 IRE was enough to pull a key, and then everything else would just be above that.
Right. And I just doubled it to 15. I mean, I took the 7.5 and doubled it because I never felt like I got quite the right edges. Growing up in broadcast, I always felt like I could get a much better edge with just a couple more percentage points there. So, but that's why I did it. But 7.5 is definitely the original broadcast black. Go ahead, Bill.
So the reason that this all becomes really important, I know Alex and everybody talks about edges and they are critical, but if you're particularly doing text over any kind of picture, you're looking for legibility. You're looking for the fact that the viewer can see it easily. And if you're making dark letters and you have a light background, it's super easy. But in video, you could have a light background one moment and the camera could shift to a dark background and suddenly that lower third that was legible would become illegible. So there's all sorts of techniques between drop shadows and alpha channels and try to get that done, to make it legible, because that's your goal.
And that's one of the reasons you don't see a lot of drop shadows in the 90s, because we were doing all those keys and the drop shadows won't key very well. So when you start getting into soft edges, when you start getting to semi-transparency, then you really want to start thinking about key fill outputs that you can do that. Go ahead, Jeff, and then Sky.
So as you move up out of the Mini into the better switchers, what's the difference between upstream and downstream? You started talking about that, and then
the upstream keys will embed into your video, so there's no clean output. So you can't, with a downstream key, the switcher will export there's a setting in your aux outs that says clean output, and that means everything except for your downstream keys is what a clean output is. So what we call the second key, one with the downstream keys, either program or dirty feed is what we call it. So there's clean feed and dirty feed, or clean feed and program. And so you put those out and you use that clean feed not only to protect yourself so that if you make a mistake, you can go back and fix it, but it's also oftentimes how you send out your broadcast to your broadcast partners. So you'll have your own show that has its own lower thirds and own, logos and everything else, but you'll send a clean feed out to broadcast partners in the pool, and they can put whatever they want over top of it if you want that. And you might decide, for instance, to use the upstream key to burn your logo in and then send it to them so they can't take that out. So there's a couple of reasons for that. The upstream key also has, because it's embedded with everything else, has a more robust engine, because the downstream key has to sit on an entirely different bus to be controlled there. So you have more robust tools in the upstream key than you do with the downstream key. The downstream key is more limited because it's an entirely separate computation. So that's the the other reason that upstream keys are upstream keys and downstream. That's why you can't do everything you can do in an upstream key in a downstream key, because then it would have to keep it as a separate bus as it moved through the pipeline. Sky?
Just a quick tip on the graphics. If you can put a stroke around the outside, just make it a little translucent and just a little darker than if you're doing like a white lettering, and you just make it, and that way it'll help that. That's an old Avid trick, but it's very handy in Photoshop also. Absolutely.
So I have a question though, before we go any further for everybody. So what did you think of the second hour yesterday? Did people enjoy it?
I thought it was outstanding.
Loved it.
Absolutely loved it.
One of the better second hours we've ever had.
Yeah, I think it was definitely in the top 5. Maybe,
Well, it was a show don't tell, because we got to see the artist doing what the artist in the, the bear in the cave, so to speak. And it wasn't a tech. I mean, I love the tech and I love the behind the scenes, but the performance, this was why we're doing this.
Well, and I thought that it was a little bit of a risk, because I don't know him. It's not like I knew Brian. So I literally saw him tweet something and tweeted out to him and just said, "Hey, are you interested? We got this thing. And here's a clip to the YouTube of someone else doing it." And I think I linked him to like Leo's or something like that. Not Leo's, but some Amber's, I think maybe. And he said, "Oh, this looks like a really cool thing. I'm down." Anyway, so then he showed up. So he was not very communicative in the last couple of days. So I didn't hear from him until he showed up. And so I was just kind of like, I had done a test the week before, but I was like, I hope he's like, until at 7:45 when he appeared, I was like, oh, okay, he's actually coming. So I felt like the kid who had invited somebody to the party and wasn't sure if they were, and told everybody they're coming, and then he wasn't sure if they were actually going to show up. And so anyway, Jeff, go ahead.
I was listening on Makana because I was pulling coax cable, and he started playing Freshman, and I just stopped and I got goosebumps just listening to it. It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, we're gonna persuade Daria, who's watching here. We're gonna persuade her to come on and do that with us as well.
I can't wait.
So anyway, and go ahead, Victor.
Please reach out to Leland Scalar. He would be fantastic to be here. Leland is a bass player who's played with everyone. He's on YouTube, and I think he'd be a wonderful guest. Incredible storyteller. So
does anyone have
a split screen between Leland and Greg?
There you go.
Anyway,
He looks
yeah.
just like Greg.
But
Yeah.
yeah, session musicians are fascinating folks. They really.
Yeah. So I think that I mean, we'll do a little bit of everything, but now that we have kind of a wild card on Monday, I'm kind of leaning towards more of these artists Thursdays, like where we're bringing artists in that isn't technical, and they might be hosts. It might be music artists. It might be actors. It might be different. Go ahead, Sky.
My chef guy is waiting for your call.
Okay. Yeah.
Graham Kerr. He'd love to be on.
Well, let's talk about that. So just ping me in Discord. Anyway, I just wanted to see what people thought of it, because I thought that it's fun to not have a purely technical one, and it's really just talking about, just talking about the overall art of it, of what we're doing. So anyway, all right, next question. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, it's also it's an interesting issue when you have somebody who wants to, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but somebody who wants to speak, but then they also want to play an instrument and sing, because a lot of people sing much louder than they speak, and he seemed to do it very effortlessly. And I don't know if that was because of processing, or maybe
It's 'cause he knows what he's doing.
very loud.
He knows exactly what he's doing. Like he's doing tons of these live shows, and he spent 14 years doing backyard shows for people, and then he's been doing live shows since COVID started. He did one that evening, I guess, on YouTube or whatever. And so he just really understands how he's a technician about how he's using his microphone. I think that's
I got to make one last little comment. The thing that I found most fascinating about him is that he is dealing with technological change in the same way that this entire group is trying to help the public manage technological change. He was articulating how much the music business has shifted under his feet. And I think the teachers here feel exactly the same way. And in that respect, it really resonated for me.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul, real quick.
Yeah, before the show, Colin and I were talking, and I told him I was going to use the Plantronics mic, and he said, well, it's fine as long as you don't plan on singing. And I told him that would be a really bad idea.
Yeah, it's nice and clear. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice and clear. All right, next question.
Another question from Jeff. He says on the ATEM Mini, the physical hardware key on button resets the upstream keyer to Chroma. Is there any way to override this?
So I can demonstrate this if you want.
Yeah.
If I go into the software control and I set the upstream key to Luma and I press on air, I have a lower third that shows. If I press the physical button on the device, it goes back to Chroma. It might have still been on Chris during that.
Right. No, I saw that.
I don't know if,
No, I
no,
saw.
I don't know if that.
We saw it. I saw it in the grid
Okay.
anyway. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, so it's automatically going. It's assuming what you want is Chroma when it goes to the.
So if I
upstream key.
set to Luma, I get a nice lower
Yeah,
third.
go ahead, Victor.
I have the same issue. I have a ticket in to them. I have not heard back.
I think it's a bug. I don't think it's a limitation of the feature set or anything else. I think they just. No, probably not I bet you not a ton of people are using upstream keys inside of that keyer. They're probably using downstream keys most of the time. And if they're using the upstream key, they're using Chroma. And so I think a lot of people just aren't noticing it. I think
Chuck Royak and I did a bunch of testing on this and ran into this exact same issue. And I said, I put a ticket in, but I have not heard back.
I think it's an edge use case. And because of that, they just don't see it. I'm sure it'll get updated. Sky and then Roscoe.
I cannot tell you how ecstatic I am that you are bringing these problems to the out loud, because as an early adopter of 20-year-old software 20 years ago, I always thought it was me.
Me too.
Right.
No, Jeff,
Well,
it really is the software, and it's
now
not
if you want to show the power of the group, what we all need to do is file a ticket.
Right.
So
Jeff,
statistically 20 or 30 tickets will definitely get engineers thinking about what's going on. So that's,
and if the watchers help us, we could get 200 tickets.
Yeah, exactly. Go
Jeff,
ahead, Roscoe.
the fix is to use a macro. That is the fix. If
macro.
you write it into a macro, then you're fine. It won't do this.
Of course, but you guys have to remember who the target audience is for this product. We're not the target audience.
Right, but again, what I would say is that,
it.
but the main thing is that it, I think this is just a bug that they'll fix immediately. Like I don't think this is, and so you're right.
But
Target audience is no. Oh, they
And-
will.
And
That's a simple-
H.264 was never meant for a broadcast spec either, but we're
Yeah.
still having to use it. So
Oh, yeah. So anyway, next question.
Question about macros. That requires the software, though. Correct?
Does.
So the ATEM Mini Pro is designed to be a standalone stream device. You can plug it into Ethernet and stream.
Although I would never
And-
operate an ATEM without a laptop. I mean, I would never do that, but it
Yeah.
could be.
You wouldn't,
you
but there's a lot of
You
people that
wouldn't.
would.
I might.
I'm just saying that's crazy. So anyway,
Because I could see taking a couple of cameras and plugging in good sound to this and streaming a live concert.
I guess what I would say is if I was going to do that really quickly, again, if you use the downstream key, you wouldn't have any trouble because it should just do exactly what you're expecting.
But there's no downstream key button on the physical device, so you need the software.
Yeah.
If they put in the software, I could control what that stream button does and switch it to downstream key would be all set.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I've ever operated an ATEM switcher without a software control. Like so it's outside of my,
I've
it's outside of my
pre-programmed
reality.
I've pre-programmed the YouTube key and
Mhm.
taken it as standalone, plugged it back into Ethernet and hit stream, and it does stream to YouTube.
Yeah. No,
So that's a real possibility to actually have this not tethered to a computer.
and
The
Scary.
other thing to think about, if you're willing to have an iPad, the iPad also, there's iPad apps that run the switcher. So you may want to just look at what those are. That might give you a little bit of interface. Because to me, it feels like I would feel like I was flying blind if I didn't have the software. Anyway, next question.
Okay, so Lucas says, has anyone on the panel used SMPTE 2110 in production, and what are your thoughts?
I've tested it 2110, and I know locations that have installed 100% 2110, and so far it was very painful. And it's not the problem is it's not cooked yet. So all the devices that need to serve it aren't there yet. So you end up going, oh, how am I going to turn this into 2110? And oh, how am I going to turn this into 2110? And I will say that when it works, it's just like having baseband. I mean, like when you get all the routers set up and you do all the other things that are required, it's like having baseband video, and it just works, and it's amazing, And so, but it takes it's not like NDI where you start plugging things in and it all starts working. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, I would like to use the word that a friend of mine uses a lot to describe things: dumpster fire. It is a dumpster fire. It is really, really hard to use at a low end or mid end. You really have to put a lot of money into the switches themselves. You're talking like $10,000-$15,000 for basic switches to be able to use with it, Eric. But you're really in a higher end. And same thing is use all the same from the same manufacturer if they have all the pieces you need, but you're not going to be able to just plug in and just expect it to work.
Yeah, it's
simple.
definitely not a low or mid end solution. It's a high end solution. It's replacing baseband. It is replacing SDI, and so it has. You're not. It's not designed to provide huge cost savings. It's designed to let you use RJ45, and so and it does give you a lot of flexibility in a way that you didn't have with SDI and routing and so on and so forth. So there are some big advantages to it. But and there's I won't put NDI on my network because doesn't follow any rules. so I'm on the other end of that.
Well, the thing is, you have to tell it. You have to have a network that can handle it, and then you have to make the rules for it. It does follow rules. You just have to know how to do the network itself.
Exactly. I think NDI is, for me, in the tests that we're doing all in AWS, NDI is perfect. I mean, it's the only thing you can use to move things around. And so I just don't like it I have so many other things going on in my network that I haven't been willing to let it.
But you're also using Meraki too. And Meraki is very adamant about Newtek is very adamant. Do not use Meraki. They are doing things in their switches that impact the NDI performance.
And we're not going to give up our Merakis for NDI.
It's okay.
It's such an amazing network that we would never leave that. Anyway, next question.
Tony Mobley. Hey, Tony, good morning. If you can't get an ATEM Mini, what should I use with a MacBook, good webcam, iPhone, and a 2019 iPad for classroom online learning?
I'd say OBS. I mean, at least to start with, OBS or Mimo. I use Mimo. I think OBS is Not
You're warming up
like
to
Mimo.
Mimo Live, aren't you?
I did, and I'll tell you, kudos to Oliver. I just want to make sure everyone's clear. Oliver never gave me anything. He gave me one copy a long time ago, but he's been offering me copies for a decade because I'm on air and stuff like that. So I got a copy of Mimo, but I've had a copy of Mimo sitting on my computer for 10 years, and it's like green eggs and ham. Like he was just constantly asking me if I wanted to have some green eggs and ham, and I was like, I will not. And then finally I was like, I like green eggs and ham, and so anyway, so I like on the Mac, I find it to be the easiest one for me to go, oh, I just need once I got my head around it, because I thought that it was just bad, like it was just crazy. The interface was crazy, but now I'm kind of used to it. And so I like it a lot, but as a no cost solution, I think that OBS for educators, I think is going to work great. And I'm planning to put it on, I don't have it on my computer right now, specifically because of these education hours. I feel like I got to put it on my computer and do some tests and try to do tutorials with it, just to make sure that I understand. I haven't used it for years. I showed my sister how to use OBS a couple years ago, and I learned it for 15 minutes and then called her and then showed it to her, and then she used it for a show. So but that's my only experience with OBS. And so anyway, go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Jeff.
The way I read this question was more on the hardware side of things. At OBS, yeah, definitely. But for hardware, what I've done with my MacBook is I went out and I bought a device that actually sets up a PCIe card. I'm trying to remember, Sonnet SE1 was the one I bought. And then I put in a 4-plex HDMI card. You can use, Magewell has one in the Pro Quad, and then Blackmagic has one in SDI and HDMI formats. You can then, if you have Thunderbolt 3, you can then plug it in that way. I would do that over using 4 USB HDMIs, because that's just going to take up juice really quick. And then a sound, do an external sound and go from there. If you want, you can always contact me and I'll give you the specs.
Jeff, and then Guy.
Yeah, I want to point them to the OBS section of Discord, where Roger and Emily have made some great, Roger built a template and Emily's demonstrated some of that about how to bring in your webcam from your laptop and then bring in a iPhone as a second camera. So you need a chunk of software that's also free to bring in your iPhone, and then get virtual camera to bring that into whatever your Zoom or Blackboard Collaborate or MS Teams or whatever your LMS is.
Yep. Guy, and then Colin, and then Roscoe.
Yeah, I was watching this video yesterday on YouTube, which is called First Day of Kindergarten, Virtual Teaching. And it was pretty impressive how simple somebody can make something. So basically, he's just got a laptop with Teams running. So if this MacBook right here that you see is running Teams, that's the webcam pointing at him. But then he's using this background, which is typical of a classroom. You can either have a projector or a TV. But basically, the kids are seeing him in front of this TV. And then down below, there's another PC that's running a document camera. And so he's putting drawings and things down below with the document camera. So he's not actually switching anything. He's just standing in front of this. And he actually does a breakdown. I'll put a link in the chat to his setup. He does a behind the scenes of First Day of Kindergarten. But I thought it was cool in its simplicity, because we can use OBS and Mimo Live and vMix and all this cool stuff. But I love the simplicity of how somebody on a low budget just figured it out. He's using his MacBook and a PC with a document camera.
Sponsored by Sonic Slushies. Product placement.
Colin, and then Roscoe.
I actually like the PCIe housing, although solution. I never thought to look for one for Mac. That's very slick, but I don't think it matches this hardware set. I too would go with OBS. Looking at the hardware, I'm assuming that the webcam is the face shot. The iPhone is for document camera, which I'd run through NDI into OBS. And the iPad would be for control surface, which I would use with Companion, which I always mistake as Comrade, which is entertaining, but Companion or the native Stream Deck software, which is a subscription, but still Companion works just as nicely.
That housing
that's how I'd go with it.
That housing is what you use for external GPU, and it'll work for anything.
I didn't realize that was generic PCIe. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Very cool.
Roscoe.
Yeah, that's okay. He mentioned all Mac products. He didn't say anything about Zoom, but if he's going to go to Zoom, I would look for $115 at the Ultra Studio Mini recorders. It's just a great way to get video into the Mac. And then you can use the iOS devices, which he did mention on Zoom on the exact same account. They can log in at the same time.
Next question.
Sure. Bob Lindsay, not your brother, says, did anyone get the Raspberry Pi? Sorry.
I just want to point out that Bob Lindsay comes from the English Lindsay, as I believe. Bob,
Different
you can correct
spelling.
me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
It's
It's still
EY,
fun to
so it's the
tease you.
English and the Scottish or the AYs, and we all keep track.
Okay,
All right.
so I'll drop it. No more Bob Lindsay jokes. Did anyone get the Raspberry Pi Zero working as a USB webcam to HDMI converter? If so, what was the quality like?
Oh, right. Go ahead, Colin.
I spent some time working on this. Bill, to his great credit, prompted me to work on it. And I burned up a Raspberry Pi USB interface in the process, but eventually got it working sort of. The frame rate was not very good, and so I set it aside as not viable. But since then, I received the Video 360 camera, which defaults to motion JPEG, and now I'm wondering whether my setup was defaulting to motion JPEG, resulting in the low frame rate. I was using GTK UVC viewer in full screen in kiosk mode on a light X server, but there might be better ways to do it, and I'm gonna have to revisit it based on the motion JPEG issue that I may have created for myself.
Jeffrey, real quick.
A couple days ago, I posted this. There was a person, this is the website febon.net. He actually made a device that actually does a webcam to an HDMI, and he plugs it into an ATEM Mini. You might want to check it. I'll put the link in the show notes.
Great.
Is that a hardware
$150
device or a Raspberry
Thanks,
Pi
Mike,
configuration?
No, yeah. Go ahead, Chris. Next question. Sorry.
Brian Anderson says, Alex, you've said that you occasionally use Skype to get remote people into shows. Can you describe how? Are you using regular Skype or Skype TX? Skype Texas.
Yeah, Skype Texas. Yeah, so Skype, we don't use Skype TX. Skype TX actually works pretty well inside the TriCasters. The latency is pretty low. The Skype TX boxes themselves have a latency that's 2 or 3 times the 2 or 3 times regular Skype. After all of our testing, and we sat there with a new tech talking about it and going back and forth, and they were like, well, that's just the way it works. So then we stopped using them. So we don't use the Skype TX boxes for it. Skype TX boxes work well if you're having someone remotely contacting someone in the studio. The problem is when you have someone remote talking to someone else remote, the higher latency in the Skype TX box makes the conversation almost impossible. And so, in my opinion, like it's just they can figure it out, but it's like talking over satellite at that point. And so, so what we use is we're using the regular Skype. We're testing right now, moving to Zoom, using the guy's suggestion of business connections. I think it was Guy that was suggesting the business connection. You get the second screen as a clean aperture. Zoom has it's shaving edges. So Skype is about 330 milliseconds and Zoom is about 225, 230 milliseconds. And that may not seem like a lot, but the closer you get to telephone, the more and telephone's about 150 to 200, the more fluid the conversation is. And so we're always trying to shave that latency down. And Zoom tells you some other number in it, but that's a lie. When we actually test it, it's 200 to 250. It's kind of ranging in that area, but that's fine. It's better than everything else. And that's per leg. Anyway, so what we do with Skype is that we have literally a Mac laptop. PCs we don't use for this because we don't use NDI, as I said before. And but we also don't have to do the logo, even with the PC one, I believe, puts out the little logo on it. On a Mac, we hit Command minus like 10 times, and then we go back to full screen, and all the interface, there's just a little edge of interface at the top and the bottom just because of the way it scales. I'm sure eventually Microsoft will figure that out and take it away, and then we really won't want to use it. And so So we have a bunch of Mac laptops, and then we connect those. Our laptops have, the reason we do this point to point and not a group call is so that we have each individual person. We're passing comms back to them. We have total control over their audio, so we can talk to them off air and everything else as we're working, and it's all tied into our ClearComm system. So so we're able to have a lot of communication and so on and so forth. And then that goes into a switcher, and then we return them back at usually some version of a super source that lets them see everything and lets them see what we want to send them back. So
that's one
the
person per laptop coming in on individual Skype calls.
Yep. There's the other way to do that is for folks in Zoom is they'll take Zoom and they'll use a computer for each person, but they're just capturing them. They're capturing each person. The problem with that is that if you go that direction, you're still ending up with a combined audio. And for us, what we can do is if there's some problem with audio, or if we want to talk to them, having them each in their own audio and video chain means I can sit there and take them, when we're cut away from them, and I can sit there, pull down their audio and start talking to them like, hey, I need you to fix your husband is sitting behind you. I need you to move them over out of the way and get back to what I'm doing. And so we can do those kind of calls, inside of our system. And even when we're putting people into Zoom, we will still connect to them either over Zoom or Skype or whatever, point to point, and then feed that program back into Zoom, because then we have that control for someone in a webinar. They won't be able to tell the difference. Jeffrey and then Mike.
I do a lot of one-on-one with screen share on in Skype and Zoom. So basically what I do is the NVI coming into, and of course I use Wirecast. You can also do it to vMix, I believe OBS as well. But it's all done on the same computer in that case. It's more down and dirty if you don't need to have to record ISOs for it. And the way I get rid of the Skype logo, since I'm on Windows, is I make a overlay, and I just make a little box in that overlay that kind of covers over the Skype logo.
Yeah, that's exactly. Go ahead, Mike. By the way, if you use a Skype TX box and you turn off the logo and you don't say that people are coming in over Skype, it is a violation of the TOS. But to my knowledge, there's no TOS in the consumer version, which is why we don't care. Go ahead, Mike.
I don't have anything, guys. I don't know. I didn't have my hand up.
Oh, no, I was talking Mike Burns. Mike Burns had it.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So just wondering how this looks. I just switched over to the Iridium. I don't know. It's a crazy name, but it is a free cam and it is NDI. Am I dropping frames that look decent or what?
Dropping a couple frames.
Just a little bit?
A little bit.
Because I don't know if this looks better than the stock camera that comes with my iMac,
Yep. It does definitely looks nice. Just dropping frames.
Can you drop a link to that program?
Yep. Next question.
Okay.
Once again, Tony Mobley. Hey, Tony, what is the best way to add a YouTube video to Keynote?
The best way, or the best way within the rules. So, the best way is there's a ton of software out there that will help you rip YouTube videos out of YouTube. So you put the URL into them. There are website. There's actually an extension, I think, for Chrome that will do it. That'll pull the video down. We get asked by artists who are coming onto our shows, like, just go get my YouTube video, and we're like, can you upload it somewhere? Because we would like to just download it. And they're like, oh, I don't know where it is other than YouTube. And so we've gotten very good at it. We don't obviously do it to take other people's stuff off of YouTube, but there's tons of tools and tons of, I don't know which one specifically I'm using. It's usually something different every time, but
they change about every 6 months.
Yeah. But you can it'll literally bit for bit pull it right off of YouTube. And because it's just HLS. So all it's doing is it's saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to throw those segments away. So that's I'm going to download the segments and I'm going to keep them. And so then you end up with the whole video, and you can go from there. Go ahead, Victor, and then Colin.
My current favorite is called Downy if you're using a Mac, and it's a very, very good solution to that specific problem.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Colin.
I favor VLC player, because one, it's not going anywhere. Two, it has no ads. You don't get
VLC will pull
unknown
YouTube
browsery things. You actually can. You can drop the YouTube link into VLC player and go to video info, and at the bottom it gives you the raw URL, which you can use to download the raw video.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that. Lucas?
It does require it to be cached, so you need to actually play the video first and then go back into the info window, and you can grab it.
Oh, Colin, we will be talking. We will be talking.
Lucas and then Roscoe.
Yeah, I like command line tools. So I would suggest YouTube -DL, which will do it without ads and without a hassle. It's a great tool.
Is that a script or
Yeah, it's
compile
a yeah it's
binary,
a binary you can install and then run in the command line.
YouTube-DL?
Yeah, that's right.
Go
And it
ahead.
actually will grab from a lot of different sites. I've put a graphic UI on the front of that. You just paste URLs into a field and it just goes and figures out where to get them from all kinds of different streaming services.
You can even pass usernames and passwords. So, for instance,
and the main thing that
Vimeo.
basically these all work with anything that is HLS because all it's doing is not throwing the segments away. You know, so it's just I'm going to keep all those segments, and then once the segments are in memory or in drive or downloaded, they can just save them out however you'd like in a new
Actually,
package.
the VLC one doesn't do that, strangely. It
interesting.
gives you a full URL to the native unsegmented file.
Interesting.
Very cool.
Roscoe?
Yeah, I'm surprised too.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
I do use iTube Downloader, but just a quick note that Congress actually put in the DMCA, whatever, college professors who are teaching film-related subjects can actually break the copyright protections. I don't know how that applies to YouTube, but it is a nice little.
I think it's generally fair use, right? I mean, for
I was just going to say that'd be fair use.
It's not. No, it's not actually fair use to actually break the copyright protection that is in law. You're not allowed to do that technically, so it's not fair use.
Okay, there you go.
I just wanted to mention too, because, and I hate to cut in like this, but this is a hack that are being described throughout the people who have just mentioned this. If you look at Google's terms of service under 5.1, you're not to view any videos or download any content from YouTube without using their player on their site or anything they approve of. So just bear in mind those who don't like to hack, don't hack. Just stick with the
right. We encourage that the only case in which you would use this is if you're downloading your own videos and you've forgotten your password.
There you go. Of course.
And Creative Commons content.
Yep. Next question.
Matt Cole from Montreal says, I asked yesterday, this is kind of a throwback to yesterday, about a bonded internet solution for a live remote, but forgot to mention that I need two-way communications for talent to see the show being produced. We're using, he says 2x vMix. I think he means two separate vMix setups on either end, which doesn't make sense. So it is a live view still the best way to go?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, if what he's trying to do there for what he's describing is a higher end live view, it's not a live view solo. It would have to be a LU 300 or 600. I believe it's 600, 800 even, that has the return path in it. The later versions do. But it's what he's saying about two vMixes is basically you could point two vMixes to each other and use them to make the link using SRT also.
I would only use a live view in that case, and you have to know that you're going to have some delay. It's not going to be as smooth as what we're having here. It's not that low latency because it has to manage the jitter. But the live view is the only stable way to do that. If you start putting vMixes into what we were talking about yesterday, which is the PEP waves, without what live view does to bond those, you're going to end up with so much jitter and mess that I don't think it's going to work. So I think the live views are your only choice at that point. And I do think that your latency will be higher, significantly higher than what we see here, because it just has to be in that transport.
One thing you can do though, and something that we do frequently also, is run a secondary comms channel instead of relying on the transport. So you bring your video back in a nice pristine way, but use Unity or VCOM or even Agent IC or whatever to be your comms back to them, the return audio. But it depends if you need that two-way conversation. If you need two-way conversation, then you need your audio delayed with your return video. Otherwise,
so
it's very
it becomes
awkward.
a little bit of a math. We have done it where we've done them over phone, and they're over phone, but the video is delayed, and it all lines back up. But it takes a little bit of work and rehearsal to figure out exactly how you're going to line up all the audio and video. And you do have to have them all as separate. When they get it back into your master control, you have to separate audio and video, and then piece them back together so that they all make sense. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, one cheap solution, again, this is not a high-end solution, would be test it out with Speedify. They have a 7-day free trial. And we have been using it with Zoom so basically to fall over to a backup connection, and it does work. And it's much more stable if you actually pay for the dedicated server. They have an option to do that as well. It does work, and they have the new update. They're basically prioritizing streaming connections, so it's a bit more stable than it used to be before. So it's something worth trying out. It's free to try out, basically, so they can try it out on one end, on the mobile end, and see if it works.
That's great. Next question.
Todd Harder says, I just got approved to purchase an ATEM Mini Pro. Does anyone have any inside info on when they will become more available?
They're making so many.
Where's Guy?
That's all I have to say.
I'm here. We're pretty much caught up on ATEM Mini Pro. We got ATEM Minis in stock, ready to fly, but the Pros we only have a few on back order. So I'd say jump in the queue, and we'll ship them as soon as we get them.
The ISOs are further back now, right? So there's always something that we can't get.
Yeah,
they're made of unattainium, but I think that the ISOs now are the big sellers, and so I bet you get it within 2 weeks is my guess. You could get it within 2 weeks now. Jeffrey.
I actually was talking with Blackmagic yesterday about it. The pros are going out on a regular basis. ISOs are going to start to ramp up in the next 2 weeks. And then just so you know, that streaming bridge will be like a month out if you are interested in that.
I've been talking to some folks in the channel, in the different sales channels. It is, while they're behind on the ATEM Mini Pros, the number of ATEM Minis moving through the country or the world is stunning, like looking into the sun. Like it, and that's why I think that it's going to be hard for a lot of other folks making hardware to keep up, because once someone gets into a vertical, it's hard to get them out. Next question.
Do you think the ATEM Mini Pro is sort of the iPhone of Blackmagic?
I don't know. I wouldn't say it's as seamless as an iPhone.
Well, no. Not that it's seamless, but like so much of Apple's business is the iPhone. I mean, it's like such a big part of it now.
I mean, I guess I would say that I just really feel like if you're a presenter or you're an artist and you just want to have a little bit more, you want to have a little more production, again, without buying a whole nother computer to do it on software. It's a pretty amazing piece of hardware. I mean, it's pretty genius.
I would love to see a chart that shows how much of Blackmagic sales is going to the ATEM Mini line.
The interesting thing is it's not just that the ATEM Mini is selling really well. It's that as soon as you buy an ATEM Mini, what do you start doing? You start buying Blackmagic cameras. You start buying, you buy HyperDecks. You buy, that's the thing. And then once you have all that stuff, you're in. Like you're now you have hardware lock-in, and getting out of hardware lock-in is super hard.
I think they call
anyway,
that the gateway drug.
Yeah, it is. It's gateway. Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Mike Andrews. Okay, here we go. Here's a bunch of alphabet stuff. Mac gurus. I got a Dell P2720 DC. It's a bunch of resolutions. It's sharp, but the text is too small. It's because it's high resolution. It looks like the fix is to set it scaled to a lower resolution if you want to read it. I'm able to use my two Dell 4K P2715Qs monitors to native and a scaled large text. How do I get that option? How does a 5K iMac handle it? I told you, a whole bunch of alphabet.
I have to admit,
I had some confusion about how the scaling works, because you can see on my settings that it's scaling the 4K ones to 1920 to 1080p, and my new monitor, you can see this, okay. It says scaled to the full resolution. The difference in the settings, though, if I go over to here, I'm sorry about how this looks, but if I go over here and I click scaled, it offers me this text thing, larger text. And I guess that's what's set to 1080p. I don't have that on the other monitor. And my main thing is I need to go to an Apple store and say, when you have a 5K 27-inch iMac, do you just go with native resolution? You can read things. And my glass is that bad? What what is everything's getting scaled, right?
We call that full squinty mode. When you go into full squinty mode.
Your mistake was
there
not
is an
buying
option. There is an option on that funky scaled thing, and I can't remember what it is. I'm sorry, but it's start mashing down on modifiers. But when you click on that, you'll get a number list instead of those.
And we're about to accelerate. So go ahead, Greg.
Probably doesn't work in all cases, but accessibility has always worked well for me, increasing the system font size and bold text and all that jazz. So that might be an answer.
Jeffrey?
Only problem with that and with scaling is some apps will end up being really off key. You'll find buttons way off to the left or the right. There's no good way, I think, on Mac personally.
All right, next question.
Next question, Ed Wilcox from Valley Cottage, New York says, can you explain the process Office Hours uses for the timestamps in the YouTube descriptions on the replay? Is someone doing that manually, or is it an automated process?
Jeffrey's like, yeah, somebody's doing it manually.
Raise your hand. Explain,
Heck
Jeff.
Yes. Go ahead,
And
Jeffrey.
we thank him.
So basically what happens is when I start up Office Hours, I start up a stopwatch clock. And now we're going to do it slightly different because we're going to actually nix out the intro. So now I have to figure out the time on the intro and then restart the stop clock so I can actually get the right times. So they'll be slightly off at the beginning, but once we go into the editor to fix that, then they'll be all on time. So yeah, every time that when Alex says the magic word, next question, please, which definitely can be on the bingo card, by the way, I end up putting. I look at the time, so I know if anything, I have that time stamp, and then of course I use the two ways through the chat and through that other screen, the teleprompter screen, to get the question. And I'm sitting there taking the 20-line questions and putting them into like 6 or 7 words, because it's important to make sure that that's a searchable line. So if somebody says, how do I do this on the ATEM, that'll actually show up in a Google search.
How much time is that process taking you currently?
Wow. Jeff, you are
It's all real time.
You are
It's
so
all
my
real time.
hero.
Yeah, you'll notice it's happening during the show. Like it's updating during the show. So basically, big hands for Jeffrey. I mean, it's amazing.
Congratulations!
Every
That's
day,
terrifying.
every day. It's great.
Wow.
Thank you, sir.
Just one thing to add for those people who don't know what Jeff's actually doing. That timestamp is something YouTube plugs in for you. If you just put the hour or the minute on the video itself, so 1:00 will let them click to that 1 minute point on the video on YouTube. And if people don't understand it, that's YouTube doing that for you.
Yeah, but it has to be typed in what Jeffrey's doing in the right format in real time. It's cool. It's very cool.
And one more thing to say is if you do that, you have to start with an opening marker, and that's 00:00. And then, well, in this case, we're going to have the first question, but normally it was intro. So just so you know, you have to start with 0. You don't have to have an end time on it, though.
Go ahead, Greg.
Isn't there a way you could do it like lap times? Or you remember in the old on old digital recordings, or you used to be able to put pop a marker in as you went along on the fly.
Yeah, the T argument allows you to enter things in various different formats: colon separated or not colon separated, decimal separated, all sorts of things.
Yep. Go ahead, Chris. We're gonna move.
I was gonna also say, if you want to do this in post-production and you happen to use Final Cut Pro, there is a new plugin that just was released that makes it very easy to take your chapter markers from a Final Cut timeline, copy and paste it right into YouTube with the perfect formatting.
Great. Next question.
Dan Huber.
No. Those are EDUs.
Oh, sorry. I missed that. Okay, that was a mistake. Okay, hold on. All right. Talk amongst yourselves. Welcome back, Leland. Here we go. Wanted to know your or anyone else's impressions of NVidia RTX voice for reducing unwanted background noise on video calls. Thanks.
Sure. I don't currently have that card anymore. I built that on Phil's machine for the wedding that we did over at iDoTV. But and Nick uses the similar card, and I'm sure several others do. It's a very aggressive DSP, which is to say that whole process that it does on the board is very effective, but somewhat overbearing, and it tends to weed out a lot of other stuff you might not want to lose. So you got to play with it and tweak it a little bit, but it's still in beta. So good luck with it.
Next question.
Sky says Zoom switching / editing on YouTube seems to have a jump frame on the edit. Is there any way to help Zoom get a clean edit without that extra bad frame on the edit?
No, I know what they're doing. Everybody does it differently. So what they're doing is they're showing
switch, isn't it?
No, I don't think it's a resolution switch. I think they're showing the last frame from that person. If you go through it frame by frame, the weird jump is when it goes back, it grabs the last frame from that person and just sticks it in there, because there's a gap, there's a latency gap that it's trying to cover over. Now, what Hangouts did, I think it might still do, but what Hangouts did is send you a really low resolution and zoom up. So you see every edit would go, whoop, but they have to do something because it's not a clean edit. Like it's changing an entire, everyone's in low res mode, and then it's changing to high res mode. I like the Hangout version where it goes from low res to high res. But what Zoom does, I think, is when I've looked at it, it's grabbing the last full frame and giving it to you, and then putting everything into it after that. And but that's your latency that's what it's papering over the fact that otherwise you just see black for that period of time, and then the next person, because it's suddenly going, oh, I need 720p. So that's why you're seeing it. And other than going back and cutting it all out.
Well, we used to have time sync generators to all cameras so that we all have the same drum major to march to. But now that we're in this other cloud world,
again, that's why when we do what we do, which is that we do one person per connection, and then we put it into a switcher, and then we cut between it. People can't figure out why suddenly it looks really good. And it's a subtle thing. They won't even notice that it's not happening. They just notice that suddenly it feels a lot smoother than what they saw before.
So we have to embrace the max headroom world and just love it. Okay.
Or get a switcher and a couple computers and make it go away. Guy?
I was going to say the same thing, or you can just tug at that person the whole time by pinning them. So if you have an extra machine, you can pin them, and because what's happening is it'll jump, like you said, but constantly, like in these little boxes, we're seeing like 240 by 180, and I've got the stats open, and then the second that I begin to talk and it pulls on me, or whoever, YouTube or whatever, it's forcing it to 1280 by 720. So basically, you just got to tug at them the whole time. So meaning you got to pin on the person.
So if you had a couple computers and they were all pinned to it, it might just be
it'll just keep it constantly going.
That's interesting. That's
thank you, Guy.
Thank you.
That's a good
Let's try that. We have a bunch of computers, or do you think all those computers have to be in the same location?
No, just pin them. You can pin
as
whoever
long
you
as
want.
Not today. We got not with 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Come on. Let's put a
It's
pin
a
in that.
pre-show thing, I think.
Put a pin in it, but it's
pre-show lab
pre-show
for tomorrow morning.
Pre-show lab. Yep, tomorrow morning. All right, next question.
All right, Roscoe says, does anyone have a favorite follow focus system for a Pocket 6K with a Canon 24-70 and the 70-200?
Do you want it to be remote or with a whip or with by hand? Like what kind of follow focus?
Definitely local, nothing remote, mechanical.
The last ones I had a bunch of Red Rock ones and they worked fine for me, but I don't have any. I haven't used, a mechanic, a local one for a long time. Any other suggestions, Guy?
Those are the ones that you have to put the little gear around it.
Okay, we're gonna go to the next question. That's the one that the Red Rock one it works great. I don't know. I haven't had any problems with it. Other than their rails are weird. It's like small. It's like 15.
We're starting the adventure. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Next
Thoughts
question.
on the panel giving, this is from Jeff Dingkong. Thoughts on the panel giving feedback to live streaming setup and output. Short video could be uploaded similar to the attention to detail series Alex used to do.
So there is the beginning of it. And once I put my system back together, which might be as early as next week, I will do some more of them. If you go to the Pixel Core site, you'll see, I believe, 7 of them, and they are exactly what you're asking for, which is they're called the teardown. And I plan to put them on the new GMT. I plan to put the new ones on the new Gear Media Tech channel as we launch it. But they are basically attention to detail from 20 years ago applied to broadcast. Now, I haven't done it to live streams that heavily. I did it a year or two ago, and but they're applied to broadcast. And if you want to see what I think of broadcast, you will get to see it. So it's called the Teardown, and it's on the Pixel Core, still on the Pixel Core channel that's sitting on YouTube, unused otherwise. All right, next question.
James Babbitt says the Discord link expires in a few minutes. How well would it work if the Discord link remained valid for a longer time?
It won't.
I'd like to.
So it'll never work that way. I believe people need to work to get in. Like it's part of it's a very calculated bump, speed bump.
A hoop to jump.
Yeah, people have to be committed to showing up, early to get the link. And if they're not, I don't want them in the Discord. So that's why it's set up that way. All right, next question.
And Paul from Texas. Hey, Paul. To Jeffrey Powers, what time today are you doing the unboxing, and what are you unboxing?
I don't think I announced any unboxing. I did show off this.
I've got some toilet paper.
So I think what happened was we were talking about the Movo, and I got this VSM5 to do an unboxing, which I am thinking about if I have some time.
But you've already unboxed it. Now we know the whole thing is.
No, I haven't unboxed it. It's still in the box. It's just
it's not in the cardboard box.
We're gonna. Oh yeah, it's not in the box, the packaging box. But yeah, definitely.
It has to start with
wrap free.
It has to start with, what do we have here? I have a box from Amazon. I don't know what it is.
Oh well, it doesn't come from Amazon, so that's.
If we don't get the ASMR shrink wrap removal, that just ruins the entire.
Oh, if it has, I did the lapel. I have the lapel monitor. I did an unbox a couple weeks ago. That's that portable gaming monitor, 1080p, and I took the shrink wrap off and everything. So, so Paul, if you want, just text me a time that you want to see it, and I'll see what I can do.
Okay, you're on, Jeffrey.
Yeah,
you're on.
So if you are an educator, we just brought Tim in. If you're an educator that want to be part of the panel, raise your hand. Let's see, we got a couple folks coming in.
Alex, I'm going to have to step out. I have some client projects I need to jump on.
Fine.
I too need to bow out. I got some things that need to get taken care of.
Fine.
Take care,
Have a
everybody.
good one, guys.
Fine, guys. See you guys.
I need to do an unboxing, so I'll see you guys later.
Me three.
Oh, step me down. I might actually come back as an attendee if you would.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes.
Somebody's out there planning an unboxing on demand channel right now.
I think you're right, Bill.
And I'm
I
going
need
to
to be attendee.
see if I can
Personal
help
unboxing.
see if
They have it for kids' toys.
see if I can help my wife jump on. So I'll be right back to.
Yep. We'll give everybody a minute to come in. If you're an educator, you want to be part of this panel, go ahead and jump on. We're going to do real quick mic checks with everyone to just make sure that everyone that we can hear everybody. And the other thing is, while we're doing these new mic checks, it's a good time to ask questions, because right now there's only 3. And so I start at 8 o'clock, and then everyone asks like 20 questions in the last 20 minutes. Just move that up. That's all I'm saying. Just move it up to 8 o'clock. And then we're next couple minutes, just throw a bunch of questions in there that you have about education, about this process. And so that's all. Because otherwise we answer these first questions really slowly because we're not sure how many questions there'll be. Anyway, Tim, go ahead. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good.
Good morning from Chandler, Arizona.
Yep. Sounds good. Chris?
Chris Clark from Tempe, Arizona. The weather's similar to what it is in Gilbert and Chandler.
You're a little low. You have a new mic.
I can crank that up a little bit.
Are we hearing that, Mike?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's that.
It doesn't sound like that mic. That you have, is that the pile?
Yes.
You might want to make sure that you're selecting that mic in Zoom as the source.
Okay. I'm working on that.
Okay.
There you go. It wasn't selected. Now.
Oh, now we can't hear it at all.
Tempe, Arizona.
Oh, I think it went back. I think it.
Hot.
Are you going through and you're using the pile mic?
I lost the audio from you guys.
So what happened was, I think that can you hear us? Can you hear us, Chris?
You know what I think it is, Alex? I encountered a recent bug in Windows. If he's on Windows and changing sound devices for the mic, if you go to the mic tab, you lose all audio. No, you lose all audio. No. It's a weird bug that I've encountered over the last few weeks.
I'm on a Mac.
Right, yeah. And
okay, so it's not that.
So Chris, make sure after sometimes when you change the mic setting, it automatically changes the output setting. The input setting, you changes the output setting to match it. So it does that for echo cancellation reasons. If you go ahead and go back in, you went, I think when you changed it, you went silent.
Yes.
So try going to it again.
Okay.
So I think you're on your home computer again.
I know what I did wrong was.
Oh, there
it is. There it is.
How's the level now from Tempe, Arizona?
Still a bit low.
Little low.
Little low. Okay, I can fix that.
And you don't need that little the little fuzzy thing on the end.
Okay.
If you're inside, not necessary.
I had a heck of a time getting it on. Needed a tiny shoehorn.
Doesn't really help outside either.
It'll be easier to take it off.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can.
I tried for a few minutes and then threw it away. So
I have extras if anyone needs them.
It's probably a vector for Corona too. So
Yeah,
let's get rid
exactly.
of it.
All right. Yeah, that's okay. Talk a little
Yeah,
bit.
I'll put the. You say the volume is low.
No, it's good now.
Okay.
Okay, good. Kent.
Good morning. I'm testing 1, 2, 3. I'm actually trying one of the pile mics that was suggested.
Yep,
So
you're coming in a little hot.
Okay.
Just a little.
Let me turn that down. Get that real quick. Oh, wrong settings. Okay, testing 1, 2. Totally
Now a little
pulling this
soft.
down.
Okay, that's good. That's good. You're good. Right
All
there. Brian or Blair, sorry.
Yep, testing coming at you from my silversmithing studio in
Yep, that's great.
Maryland. Yep.
Tony?
Cool.
Oh, go ahead, Tony. There you go. Nope, we can't hear you. We'll come back to you, Tony. We can't hear you. Your mic isn't, I don't think your mic isn't engaged or isn't plugged in, or just make sure you're.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
We're definitely hearing you there. A lot of room noise or
Doesn't
some
sound
kind of
like
noise.
the headset mic.
Actually, I don't have a headset in, so I can do that.
Oh, no. And we're talking about the headset, the mic that you have. It doesn't sound like the mic that you have that you're wearing.
Let's see. Actually, it's not. Let's see.
Can you select it?
Yes, that should be built-in line-in mic, right? For the
No,
pod?
no, there should be another mic there. If you have that headset plugged into the USB, it'll probably be some random name that's like
plugged
whatever
into
the
a
name of your USB interface is.
Yeah,
Yes,
whatever.
USB adapter.
Not plugged. It's plugged directly into.
No, it sounds better now.
MacBook.
Oh, it's directly into the MacBook.
I don't think it can go straight into the MacBook.
The PAL is directly in the MacBook.
Yeah, the older MacBooks will take it right in, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm hearing it now. I mean, it doesn't sound like it just did. So all the fan noise went away. Go ahead, talk a little bit more, Tony.
So the weather here today is a little cloudy, and
Yep, that's that mic.
I moved away from the window.
Very good. Very good. You still have windows behind you. That'll be the challenge. So you can't win. But yeah, as soon as you get getting the windows in front of you rather than behind you will be what we want to try to do as we keep moving forward. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, okay.
Me, Michael, or
yeah.
I'm sorry. I sometimes assume there's another Michael in the meeting. How am I sounding now? Good.
Yep, sounds good. Sounds
Sweet.
good. Tony, I'm
just
going to
had
come back to you. I thought you might sound a little over-modulated there for a second. Go ahead, talk, Tony.
Alex, you're costing me money because now I have to find a space in the garage where there are no windows and run an Ethernet port out there as well.
I'm never gonna. I'm sorry. I'm gonna be an expensive friend. It's just we've gotten at least down to $30 headsets instead of $800 headsets. So we're making progress. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I have another homework for our educator, Tony. If he could lift his camera up to eye level somehow with a couple boxes or whatever, that would help a lot.
We're all kinds of trouble. All right. Now we've got a bunch of questions. We have stalled long enough, and we're going to start jumping into those questions. So stand by here. Let's see here.
I finally got my wife's computer.
I don't see her though. We're missing
Julie Gleason.
Julie
Hand up.
Bueller. So we can say that here. Bueller.
I know.
Bueller. Hi, Julie. Can you hear us? You want to say anything? No. Okay. All right. So
thank you.
Dan Huber asks, with Zoom local recordings, some faculty have recordings where the audio sounds like it's missing bits, so it sounds garbled. I don't see this with cloud recordings. Do you know why this happens? Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I've dealt a lot with this a couple of the past few weeks because I've been doing a few webinars. And if you're doing a local recording, that recording is based on, like if you have spotty Wi-Fi or, not a good connection, then that local recording will have those glitches. But of course, Zoom, which everyone is sending out to anyway, the cloud recording will be good.
That's great. So one of the things about the connection is you just have to remember that Wi-Fi was never built for real-time communication. It was built for surfing the web, and it's a great protocol for that. But the way it talks and goes back and forth, it drops packets all the time, and it usually corrects for those. But in a real-time situation like this, it's going to lose packets. And so one of the things that everybody wants to be connected with Ethernet, especially the person who is going to be recording locally, because if they get those little glitches, and you'll see them every once in a while with folks here, where they just sound like they're phasing or it's a little garbled at times, those bits that you're talking about, that's most likely Wi-Fi. And that Wi-Fi may have occurred during the event with the person on the far end if they were on Wi-Fi, but it'll definitely occur on your end if you are on Wi-Fi. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, also in the analog days, turning things up too loud wasn't that big a problem because it got a little messy, but it wasn't horrible. In the digital era, sometimes if you overmodulate, it'll drop whole little packets and you'll get that kind of on and off rapidly sound. So that's one of the reasons we do these level checks. You want to get it not too low, but also not too high.
Tony asks, looking for recommendation for an app or method for a masked teacher wearing a mic plugged into an iPhone to amplify her voice by transmitting over maybe Bluetooth speaker in the classroom. Classroom is relatively small, less than 30 people. There is no built-in speaker system in the room. Go ahead, Emily.
I actually did this one time with a teacher that needed a system, and on the iPhone there's an app, I think it's called Microphone Live, and it allows you to send it to a Bluetooth to speaker. So we had a JBL, like the one that looks like a football almost, it's like round, and was put on the desk, and then the teacher would speak to it. The thing with the mask is you're going to have to make sure either they use the headset to the iPhone so that they can go under the mask and get that microphone in or close or something, because it's going to come out muffled. If they're wearing the mics, like the FM systems that the teachers have to wear in the classroom, those hang on the chest, and they do have a mic port on the side of most of those.
And one of the things that I would recommend is for your iPhone, it might be, I think it's on Android as well. It's called Bellis 3D. So Bellis 3D will let you literally scan your face. So you can sit there and scan it like this, go up and down, and it'll build a 3D model of your face. That may not seem useful, except for the fact that they have a piece of the app that will also build an STL file of a mask that will fit your face perfectly. And I have a printer here that I haven't got. I've been so busy in the last couple of weeks. The printer showed up and I haven't printed it out. But you can also send it to a service and have them print it out. What it does is it takes your standard paper mask and it gives it a way to pop it away from your mouth a little bit. So it'll just clip it so that it'll give it structure, but also pull it away from your mask. Now, what I'm doing with it that I've been working on, I showed it at another show at some point, is I'm going to take it into a 3D package and build something so that I can actually put a mic underneath it and then have something go over it. And my schedule has been too crazy to finish it. But that simple version of it, which will cost you probably a total of $15 total, it'll build the 3D model for about $3. And then you can upload it to something like Shapeways and they'll send it back to you. And you don't have to have a printer. I got a printer because I want to experiment with it, but you can just send it somewhere like Shapeways and they'll print it and send it back to you. So for $15 or $20, you can get something that will pull it away from your face, but it also gives you this plastic structure that I think that it would be easier to put a mic and attach it to it to get it underneath. Then you have to figure out how you're going to get to the iPhone and how you're going to, like there's a bunch of other problems, but that is, one possibility. You may be able to also find, I think that Bluetooth, I think there's some Bluetooth transmitters too, that are just mic transmitters that will pair to a speaker. But you have to be careful of, again, you're now getting into mics and speakers in the same room and you can start getting some crazy feedback. So it's important to keep the speakers in front of the speaker. The person talking needs to be behind the speaker. Otherwise you're going to end up with some feedback loops. Mickey and then Bill. And then Ken.
Yeah, I would be wary of anything Bluetooth because of the possible delay that could be added in the chain, and that could be very distracting to whoever is speaking. And in terms of the muffled mic, like another way around it, because throughout the past few months, I've built up a nice collection of different disposable masks, and I find, like, say, the 3M V Flex masks seem to muffle a lot less than, say, full on like the big N95 ones, and also like regular surgical masks that are not as thick as the N95 ones seem to muffle less as well.
So when Emily mentioned that, it caused me to think about Live Listen, which is Apple's accessibility function that allows you to use your phone as a separate microphone into AirPods. That's useful for the hearing impaired community. But if you flip that around, I think you might be able to find some possibilities. The downside is that, yeah, normal Bluetooth, the regular Bluetooth protocol does have a lot of delay. And do you want to toss it to Kent? I don't think
go ahead, Kent. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so a lot of my colleagues were talking about using those shields, those plastic shields where you can see the faces, but those have recently found out that you can't use those because they don't quite protect the way. So a lot of people had invested in buying a bunch of those, and now it turns out they can't use them.
Kent? Oh, Kent. Oh, that was it. Anyone else?
Mm-hmm.
This is another one that was suggested by Andrew a while ago. So this is a singer's mask, by the way. So, and this goes up over your head. I'm not gonna put it over my head, but it basically comes out a lot. It looks like a duckbill, but it gives you a lot of space. But it's designed for, and I've been playing around with putting the speakers. So now, like my mic, this microphone is underneath. I don't know how well it sounds on your end. It sounds
surprisingly well. It's not as muffled.
Yeah, we could just duck a bit of like 200 to 400 hertz.
Yeah. So that's the mic underneath the duckbill. Now your students might have a lot of fun with you. I have been thinking of painting it as a duckbill, but with teeth, like going all like a duck. I'll paint it all yellow here, and then give it like a big edge, and then right across the front, this front part, just give it some like really nasty teeth. I think that I would get a lot of. It's not quite as good as my here. Then there's, because that. Whoops.
That and a plague doctor nose would be a really interesting look.
There's this, like it'll fit right under this part here. I can't put it on, but you'd have to teach if you wear this one, you have to teach the whole class as Bane. So you're like, so you have to be all right. Next question. We're going to talk about the Civil War, and that's how you'd have to say you'd have to give the whole class that way, and it would be anyway. So,
but it sounds like people are really going to have to experiment with whether the mic sounds better inside or outside of the mask, because inside of your duck mask it sounded great, inside of your Bane mask it didn't, and so it's probably going to
exactly. You have to work.
It's probably going to vary from mask to mask and with mic to mic. So experiment with both.
Are you actually telling me that your dog ate the? Anyway, sorry. Next question. I said next question. I'm next question. Sorry about that. Aaron Graham says, best way to give spelling tests over Meet or in a way I can guarantee no cheating or autocorrect. Boy, that's a hard one. I don't know about spelling. Go ahead, Emily.
Well, I do know that I was at the Google convention thing that they had online the other day, and they did say that although they've added all the grammar tools, that the admins can turn them off. So you can choose to have, the autocorrect turned off. So you may want to ask your admins about that. But as far as like making sure they're not cheating or anything, like you can use like things like GoFormative or Google Forms and just have them type it in, but you're never it's really hard to do testing from home.
I have to admit, I often joke the fact that I don't need to know how to spell anymore. I just need to know how to spell well enough that Google can auto-complete it for me. So anyway, go ahead, Tim.
One of the things that I always talk to people about is the idea that just because you're teaching an online class doesn't mean that every activity has to be on the computer. So doing a written spelling test with someone watching and then taking a picture of that to submit it is another option. If you need to monitor them over a Zoom call, have them just back up so that you can see them at their desk taking the test. and then send a digital representation. Not every assignment has to be a computer-based assignment just because it's being delivered online.
Yep. Go ahead, Michael.
The solution that we've been talking about at Berkeley, which has capped major courses to the extreme with proctoring, is basically what Tim said. Is if you want to do something, is having a video of them, depending on what you're trying to control for, that could be a video plus a screen recording. So that's possible with Meet and Zoom or actual dedicated proctoring software. But then the solution that we found effective this summer for students is, kind of giving them a view where you see their hands and what they're working on. That way there is just some agency and sort of, they understand that this could be reviewed, and the hands are really where the work is happening. So it's a little bit harder to avoid. That said, probably not an issue with those taking a spelling test, but worth highlighting anytime you're relying on uncontrolled hardware. There are ways of bypassing any of these proctoring scenarios. Hopefully that's not an issue with the younger ones.
As there are in real school. Greg. Yeah, Greg.
Yeah, we have a system over here called Inspera, which when you have an exam, it locks out everything else. So you can't access web pages, you can't do anything else on your computer but that. And the other thing to avoid looking stuff up in books and paper and stuff like that is put a time limit on the test.
All right.
They don't have time.
Well, yeah. So one of the things I would say to that, one of the best things the most useful parts of school I had in grade school was I had a teacher, Curtis McQueen, I can still remember, created a challenge or a game for learning our times tables. And so it was who could do the times table the fastest, and there was a certain level of whatever. And we had to do our times tables up to 12 times 12, is 144. And to this day, up to 12, I can do it instantly. It is, it's like, that was something that, because it was this thing that we would do, 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 3 is 3. And it was you just do that. And it was how fast can you do each one of those? And there was this big ranking of who could do it the fastest and who could talk. And I get that you couldn't do that for everything, but all of us were working really hard on that board. And I was nowhere near the top, but I still benefited greatly from the work of being able to do it. It did give advantage to students with diction. Like good diction was something that if they could talk fast. Go ahead, Chris Clark.
I thought it was farther down in the queue. Sorry. My thought takes a different direction, which is how can we use our imaginations to make what used to be called cheating practice, so that instead of trying to duplicate the way we've done things in the past, which we can't do anymore, let's rethink testing and spelling testing and how it's useful for the students to practice or find 32 ways to find the correct spelling of a word that they're trying to use in an essay later on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the classes that I've always felt were the most successful that I taught were ones with, I didn't really have a lot of tests. It was mostly, but there was a lot of interaction with content, so they were constantly submitting things. And so it was very hard to cheat when you constantly have to come up with something. So the tests themselves, I felt, were highly inefficient. They're easy as the only sample that you're using, or a very sporadic sample. I felt that they were too sporadic, and so I felt like getting something every day or every couple days of production showed me more about where the students were than a 1 week or 2 week sample. I just felt like the sample rate needed to increase, so Sky and then Guy and then Lucas.
This may be a completely different question, but you talk about recording, and I mentioned this to my teacher wife, and her question is, what is the security issues? I mean, have we already signed away I'm peeking into your bedroom, living room, dining room, whatever, and giving teachers that authority? And then the other question was privacy issues. So security, privacy, where does that fit into this conversation?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, so it's a huge concern, and at Berkeley, you know, I like, man, would I love to not deal with final examinations, because they're just no fun for everyone. But in the spring, we chose as a school policy to basically just say that there was no way that anyone could evaluate a proctoring solution fairly in the spring. And then in the fall, there's going to be pilots. But a lot of it is, you know, basically assuming that we have recordings of students, or that, you know, they need them. And I think for each school, they're going to have to make that decision of, do they need them? You know, what are the parameters that we put in place? And for some of these students, this is like, you know, where do those recordings go? Because if you have a large number of undocumented students, which is, if you have the ability, or, you know, on a college campus, a great thing to have, you know, those recordings could potentially be used against them in the future in some ways. So, you know, who's, you know, doing the server? How do we account for background students taking things in cars? And a lot of it's just getting really clever with the, you know, the allowances, the things that you can provide students, and then the accommodations. But everything from where is that data being hosted to, you know, do we have provisions for a lack of Wi-Fi? You know, who is the person reviewing that? Is that a US employee of some proctoring company? Is it a TA? Is it someone, you know, somewhere around the world? All those things I know have been talked about, at least on our campus, in the past few months. And no one has good answers.
The psychological question for Chris is, what about the student that is shy? I don't want to be on camera. Oh, well, guys.
Well, and also, and I think that I think that one of the things that, because I was one of those kids, for whatever reason, I don't like to show my work, you know, and so it was like this. Everybody's got like a weird OCD thing, and I just wouldn't show my work, and I didn't need to, you know, like I could just do most of the answers in my head, and so I just wrote down the answers. I get all kinds of trouble. Like the number one reason I didn't do well in tests was not because I didn't get the right answer, it was because I didn't show any work. I would write, like in chemistry, I'd be like, that's 3.2 moles, you know, like it was just, you know, like it's you know, so anyway, so I think that becomes part of the issue. I do think that when we have all this money floating around, we have to think about what was the development. One of the problems that we have with games in education is that they're underfunded and they're not very interesting, on the border of just unbelievably painful to play. And so we think that they're great, but they're not. And right now we've got all this money floating around trying to figure this out. And I feel like games is something that my kids understand. My kids understand leveling up in games, and they get extremely good at what they do inside of that game. And they get very pattern oriented, and they do it over and over and over again, and they figure it out. And I think that there's something there to learn, you know, what if we spent $500,000 or $500 million or whatever on a really, really high quality math game that was actually fun to play. You know, and I wouldn't necessarily say we should have a government agency or educational agency do it. I think we should go to Roblox, get the founder of Roblox, who also built interactive physics, and pay him to do that. You know, and and figure out, you know, how to make it fun. You know, like one of the things I started experimenting with in Roblox specifically for this thing, I had some slow time last year, and so I was playing with it, is building a physics education tool. But what it was is that you're firing a cannon to hit a target, and you had to calculate trajectories, you know, and you had to guess what those trajectories are. And so you'd have to use the math for something actually fun rather than just doing math for math's sake, you know? And I think that there's a lot of ways but kids, I think, would respond to that much better than tests, you know, if it was good. But you'd have to bring real game designers in, not educators, because the problem with education is that everyone that runs it, we're good at it. They were good at that, so they think, well, that seems to work for me. Like my wife and I have this constant conversation, because I didn't like school very much, and my wife, you know, was valedictorian, homecoming queen, you know, that kind of thing. So school was really great for her. So she has a different view of school than I do, and so she really, you know, and so I think that we need to look at the people that don't like school and figure out how we pull them in. And there are a lot of ways that they like to interact. Go ahead, Emily.
So there's a math company that gamified math called Prodigy Math, and that one was wildly popular among our students. And then New York passed a privacy law, and because they're servers are in Canada or wherever, we're not allowed to use it anymore. So Freckle Math out of Renaissance tried to do the same thing with coins and stuff. And like the kids are like not buying it at all. Cause the other one was kind of like Zelda, like you walk through a world and you had to solve math problems and there were wizards and you could challenge your friends. And it was really engaging. And then it was, you know, the Freckle version is like total trash. And then
and again, wait, why total trash?
Because they're dumbing it down for the kids as far as the gamified part of it is. Like, it's still math problems, but it's like earn coins to make your avatar cuter. And it's like the kids are like, I don't care if my pig is walking around in a pink tutu or a green t-shirt. Like the kids are like, that's not cool. Like battling your friends and wizards to gain points and to level up. And then the teachers got these really nice reports where the students could actually write out their work. They could, there was like Scratchboard, it was for K-8. But the quality between Prodigy and Freckle is like night and day. And then the other problem is that to what Alex was saying about creating those games is, yes, the gamers should be creating it, but there should be an education person on board.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, but because Renaissance Learning had a question on their test about why the U.S. was helping Black people after the Civil War, and one of the reasons was because they don't work hard was one of the choices that the answers that the kids could have. The other choice was because they're lazy. And it was like, well, this is not at all okay to be putting out to every student. And it was a huge company that a lot of schools invest in. And so if you don't have those people who pay attention to those details, you get a lot of scary stuff.
And I think that the first places that I would think about this gamification, the last place I would think about it is history, because it's so it's fissionable material as far as how we talk about that. But the first place that I think that I would think about it is math and physics and sciences and so on and so forth, where you can play with, where it's a harder target. But I do think that, again, we can think about all the trouble that we're having right now, but the opportunity right now is that we know we have to spend a lot of money to figure this out. And there are game companies like, whether it's Epic Games or Blizzard, or, that if the government came to them or the education system came to them and said, we've got $500 million to spend on doing something, and we're going to have you work with a bunch of educators and we're going to figure this stuff out, these folks could build something that I think would be compelling, that a lot of people could use, with a little. They're not going to do it without some underwriting, because they have their own problems, but not their own problems. They're making more money than they've ever made before, but they're busy doing that. But if they were given a distraction by the government, I think they could end up with something kind of aggressive. Go ahead, Brian.
The job that pays the bills is working at the University of Maryland for a language unit, and we produce e-learning content in less commonly taught languages. And we just did a virtual reality game, I guess you'd call it, in Russian, or a task, and you're on this some kind of a sea vessel that is falling apart, and you have to figure out how to get to shore. But everything, all the signage and everything is in Russian, and you have to use the language to accomplish the task. And so rather than being something where you get a pink tutu on the thing, it became something that was very engaging. And with language, it's time on task, like a lot of things, but you got to spend more and more time doing it and using the language and engaging with it to learn it. And we found it very effective. I'll see if I can find the study that we did with it.
I mean, I look at how much I don't play it very much now, because I usually, when I'm traveling, when I'm sitting in a line or I'm on a plane, I play, when we're taking off, before I can pull my computer out, I play Kingdom Rush, which is I only play desktop tower defense games. That's all I do. And when I play games, I don't play that many games. And so it's the new desktop tower defense that I'm playing. But I think about how many hours I've played that, and I was like, if this was actually something that taught me something useful other than managing scarce resources, I would have learned a lot. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I think in general, it's a good time for us to all be rethinking assessment in general. Just taking that step back. Instructional designers talk all the time about objectives. What's the objective of the lesson? What are you really trying to assess? Rather than just carrying forward old patterns that have, like spelling tests that have happened. And I know that probably elementary teachers and K-12 teachers have content standards that say they have to pass spelling tests. But if the goal is, I obviously, for a spelling test, the goal is that you can spell certain keywords or high use words. Is there another way that you can assess that students know how to spell and use those words? And that's often a conversation we have when moving a physical class into an online is, what are you really trying to assess? What are you really trying to look at? And to see if there's a better way that you can do that.
But you're working inside of a bureaucracy that is justifying the top-down government
Well, I think it's
structure
just-
and
it's just a-
testing is their answer to funding. So how
Right.
do you?
Lucas, and then Greg. Did you have your hand up, Lucas? I think I might have
Yeah,
skipped
but
you.
it has been said by nearly
Okay.
everyone, so I don't have to.
Okay.
do-
Okay, great. Greg.
No, I think another issue is that in the past we were able to, part of the learning experience was participation, improvement, these were all parts of the assessment. And for at least here, we can't do that. All of our rubrics have to be totally objective. So the disadvantaged student is unfortunately just that.
Right.
And there's no way to take the subjective side into account. And
it's hard to think
that's-
about what objective
it's really a
actually
shame.
is. It's hard to say what objective actually is, because I didn't read very well. Horribly dyslexic, and so all I did.
Me either.
I don't know if I learned anything in a lot of these classes. What I learned was the methodology to get A's. That's like my, I didn't care about
So did
anything other
I.
than that. But it was like it didn't matter to me. Like I didn't cheat. I'd get in trouble for cheating, but just short of cheating. And well, when I say not cheating, I learned how to read the cliff notes and read every third page. And that was giving me enough detail to drive back to without actually having to read the whole book, which I thought was a waste of time. And so so there was, but I literally my entire methodology in high school was just to get A's, so my parents wouldn't talk to me about it, then I could go do what I wanted to do, which was had nothing to do with school.
But part of that,
go ahead.
But part of that conversation, Greg, is moving focus away from too many big summative assessments and really embracing the smaller formative assessments along the way. And if we can break up things into much smaller pieces that are gradual, then you can see that improvement and progress. And if someone trips along the way, they're only losing a little bit of the pie.
Yeah,
but in the end game, those formative assessments don't mean anything, because
in your platform
assessments that are the grade.
How do you eat an elephant?
And
one bite at a time.
Well, but the problem is that so Norway's broken. So the in that process, I believe that eventually what the possibility of online school is that every interaction is graded, so that every time they answer a question, every time they vote on a question, every time they and nothing means a lot and everything means something. And then what you're getting is this overall impact of what their participation is in the class. There's no big project that is 30% of their grade. There's no big test that's 20% of their grade. There's just their interaction all the time, possibly even with each other, that is part of their participation in learning.
But you're almost moving to pass fail.
Sorry?
You're almost moving to pass fail.
But that can be graded as a.
That's fine with me.
I think that grades are silly. Michael, and then Chris, and then Daria.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think part of this also then gets into why, why was a question about proctoring asked, and what does that mean? And I think in some ways, proctoring itself and these things are less about the assessment and more about the question, do we know who is on the other end of that assessment? Which is, when there is a diploma from a school with someone's name on it, or a degree from a university, right? That assumes that whoever is representing that institution believes that, I am Michael and my work was Michael's work, or at least primarily my work, or within, whatever bounds we want. And so the unfortunate reality too, for certain groups of people, is that a lot of this is just a lack of trust in the system, especially remote. When you're in a classroom and everyone's taking an exam, it's certainly possible to cheat. I don't think everyone recognizes that's much as it is, but there's a little bit of, at least I've seen your faces, I know who you are. And in a world where everyone is literally around the world, some of that can be difficult to replicate. And I think that's at an institutional level where a lot of people are struggling. And I unfortunately don't have a good answer to any of that, except to say that it really sucks.
Well, and that it's endemic, and it's been endemic for forever. You know, like I wrote, you know, for the same class. I mean, how I paid for my little fun things in high school was that I wrote other people's research papers. Give me one paper that you wrote and I'll write it in your voice and I'll write it out. And that's how I made money, you know, because I was really good at it and I could do it really fast. You know, and it was just like, this is silly and I'm enjoying it. They're not enjoying it. And I didn't, you know, I didn't do that in college. But in high school, it was much easier than raking people's lawns for $5 an hour. And so this idea that somehow we have to have a perfect system that isn't going to, that nobody can break, I think is a probably difficult thing to do. And it was never perfect. Go ahead, Chris, and then Daria.
Fortunately, the statute of limitations has expired on you.
I actually, until I said that, I realized I've never admitted that to anyone ever in public, or anyone. so
your secret is safe with us, but
yeah, exactly.
I've got a paper I need a little help on. I'll talk to you offline.
And by the way, all those research papers, super useful in the rest of my life. You know, like, you know,
exactly.
As far as how to do.
While you were cheating, you were learning.
I learned a lot. Anyway, next question.
I had a
sorry, go ahead, Chris. Yeah, go ahead.
separate point, which was one extreme is what Alex described of, and essentially measuring every day, doing very thin slice salami. So everything I do or fail to do is part of my final grade. The other extreme, which I think is worth considering, is that the evaluation question is all about, well, how are you going to make use of what it is that you're learning in the world outside school? Too much of school, in my opinion, is about learning how to do school. You know, you're going to need this in 11th grade because, you know, that's why we teach you algebra in 9th grade, because you got to do school next year and the year after that. Whereas my pitch is, well, really, school is at its best for doing something real in the world outside school and for the rest of your life, not just for the next semester. So if you buy that way of thinking, then evaluation ought to be left till the end, and the end product ought to be something that works in the real world, not just in the controlled environment of a classroom or a monitored Zoom
Chris Clark,
test.
can I adopt you? Can you be,
I'm sorry.
Can you be my uncle?
You're too young.
No, as an uncle. I want to adopt you as an uncle. Please.
Let's just be friends, as Mr. Rogers used to say.
Daria, and then Tim.
I couldn't agree with Chris more as a former student and then someone who loves to talk education with my mom, who's a teacher and a curriculum writer. I've always felt that. And I'm personally sitting here kind of dreaming up with my mom, like at our kitchen table, and hoping that maybe this can push us away from the factory model that's been just, you know, keeping a lot of really excited kids who love to learn, like really crunched down, like me, like Alex. I learned the same thing. I learned how to game the system, you know, so that I could spend more time writing songs at home and less time like learning stuff at school. And it makes me wonder if maybe, even though you're stuck with the standards that you have to meet, like in public school, if we could start moving to maybe supplementing with things like almost masterclass, but for kids, where you could start focusing on your own passions earlier, so you can spend more of your time on the stuff that you care about.
Well, I think this is the one opportunity that we get right now to actually flip the 80-20 model, so that we have passion projects, small projects. We start to say that, you know, when something is inflexible, it's going to crack. And the system of extrinsic motivation that is the grading system is going to crack in a pandemic. It isn't worthwhile. And while these discussions are fascinating, there are children that are suffering. They feel isolated, they are unheard, and they need vehicles in terms of content to allow them to express what's going on, you know. So I think there's also an entire population of retired teachers, professors, or people that are experts in their fields that are also very lonely And if we had systems, you know, I'm not tech savvy at all. I spend my entire life in classrooms designing simulations that are interactive. But if we had systems whereby we could tap into that unbelievably rich resource of people that need children and children that need people, you know, you see it in a kind of a strange way when you're marking the SATs. They hire rafts and rafts of retired teachers to mark the essays. And, you know, the whole game as a teacher is, what are the criteria? How does this work so that I can teach the kids that they can meet that criteria, as you said, Alex, you know, so I can get that grade. But that's not what education is about. And this is a time for heart. We need so much heart right now.
Well,
That's my thought.
and I guess the only other thing is that the how much do we need to teach the kids past what they're interested in? You know, like, I think that that's something that we have to think about, you know, that like do like, for me, once I got past basic English, you know, and structure, once I got to a point where I understood Strunk and White, I didn't need anything else. Like, I don't need to sit in these, as far as I'm concerned, I didn't need to sit in those classes anymore. You know, I was really interested in math and physics and chemistry, and that's what I want to do. And I knew it. So now I'm spending a half to a third of my time in school doing something that I hate. And I just don't, and then there's other kids that didn't want to do math. Now, I think that it's important to get through algebra because you have to understand the relationship of variables as a human being. But once you get past that, if you're not interested in it, no one who isn't doing this all the time will remember Pythagorean theorem. They won't remember, you know, those things because they didn't care. You know, like it was something they had to get grades for, you know, and so I love Pythagorean theorem. I have books and books and books on it. I'm kind of obsessed with it, but most people won't understand anything about it. And so we have to think about whether students at some point can just focus on what they love to do and do more of that, and whether we keep on having to bash them with things that they hate, which is probably for any average student somewhere between a third and 2/3 of what school is. Chris, and then Tony.
I want to second what Daria's mom said and say that I thought it was Daria's twin sister until she was introduced. But also I want to point to something I just posted in the chat, which is a link to an op-ed that Sal Khan of Khan Academy published in yesterday's New York Times that makes exactly the same point. He probably swiped it from Daria's mom. Which is that what teachers need to do and what students need now is that human connection, that relationship, and that online education, what the teachers should be focusing on is that connection, that reaching out, that relational connection and support that only they can provide. And the content, it's already out there. There are thousands of really good videos, better than what I could make as an ordinary teacher. So it's about compiling the good stuff content-wise and putting your teacher energy into being the coach and the mentor and the trusted listening ear to these hundreds of millions of kids who are feeling just as lost as we are.
Greg, real quick, and then I'm going to move into speed round because the number of questions and the number of minutes left are almost equal. Go ahead.
But I think one of our primary jobs is to increase this intrinsic motivation and get them to the point where we're teaching them how to learn. You know, it's not about the subject material. It has nothing to do with the subject material, really. We have to teach them how to get out there and to look for answers, because right now they're not. You know, they're looking to us to give them all the info. What are you going to teach me today? Right. Professor Curta, what are you going to teach me today? And I say to you, it's not about that. What are you going to learn today?
Well, and again, that's my methodology for everything that I teach is I challenge people to do something in which they are insufficient, and then I feed them what they need to do to get it done. But I don't, you know, and they have to claw through all of that stuff to grab onto it. Scott asks, what is the best format to deliver interactive documents to students? Emily.
All right. So I asked in the chat, I asked him what he meant by interactive documents, just because depending on the LMS that you're forced to use in your school district, it could be very different. So like, for instance, the coffee tutorial I did was in Google, and that's a great way to be interactive because I use that same layout to let kids choose their own adventure so that they can, like, the topic or the thing that you need to learn, the skill that you need to learn is X. These are the 15 different ways you can show me you know X. And one of them is you can come up, just clarify it with me. And then they choose their adventure. They get the information and parameters for the thing that they're going to create. So it's project-based learning, basically. But there's a lot more voice and choice if you use Google Slides and do the interconnectivity. If they're using Microsoft, you can do that also in PowerPoint and in Teams with OneNote. Those all talk to each other, and depending on what you have access to. So it's really a question of what do you have to share it with the students.
And for those using Mac software and so on and so forth, the Pages is almost completely taken over iBooks. So I mean, you can put a lot of things into it, and that's going to get, I think it's going to get super interesting over the next year, because I think that we're getting closer and closer to the Surface with USDZ. So I think that especially as that gets added, it's going to be nifty. But I build a lot of my interactive stuff in Pages so that I can put videos in, I can put, all kinds of other little bits and pieces, and it's almost completely, they almost have taken almost everything from iBooks and put it in there. But those are a bunch of different options. Aaron asks, is there any way to monitor many breakout rooms at once, Meet or Zoom, thinking things may go awry if the teacher presence is not consistently present? 8 to 10-year-olds. Yeah, Emily?
All right, so I'm actually working on this right now. A lot of our school districts can't get enough school cleaning supplies, so we can't go back for the month of September. So what we're going to do is do the online learning only. So what we're doing is talking about that specifically, the breakout rooms. So what we've done is we've looked to TAs and to, so teaching assistants and teachers' aides, putting them to work. Also people that work in the building, that are like administrative assistants who aren't under a direct like principal or someone like that. Look to your parents, ask them if they want to volunteer. You can, because you're working with an age group where like having a parent in the room will help some of that kind of craziness. But what you do is you assign each one of those adults to a breakout room with the group of kids, and you can pre-do your breakout rooms in Zoom. So you can put a list of kids and they will automatically, when you send them out with the adult, to the breakout room, because there is no way to jump in between the rooms and monitor them from afar right now, unless there's one hack, but it's way beyond the basic teacher classroom. So there was one hack where you do multiple feeds in, and it gets really messy really fast, and I wouldn't even try to explain how to do it. But there, I say use your community. That's my answer. Use your community.
Good, Michael.
Yeah, it's hard to underestimate the value of TAs in any context. So much of this stuff would not be possible without them. The one thing is, 8 to 10-year-olds can be really hard in general. But, with breakout rooms, I think, for students of any age, one of the things that just really helps is being clear with them what you're hoping they will do and what they will get out of that breakout room. So some useful techniques can be preparing a set of Google Docs for each number of breakout rooms. And so the task then is very clear, which is you 3 or 4 will fill out this doc. And, when you're done, we're going to talk about it, and making so that when they get in that room, they're not staring at 3 or 4 of their faces and trying to figure out like what's next, because that process is hard for, any group of people. The other thing is none of the platforms are great at it, but, just if you're doing an exercise that is more than 3 minutes, just cycling through those rooms can be really effective as an instructor. It's definitely active, and it feels like more work in some ways than being in person, but it can definitely help keep some of those conversations moving.
That's great. Next question. Greg asks, I'm trying to work on a 90% free system using OBS and other free software, phones, iPads. Do you think this could work? Go ahead, Jeff.
So hopefully it's going to work without crashing my machine, but I'm going to switch over from my ATEM Mini to OBS virtual camera. And I'm going to thank Roger. And let's see if it comes up live. You're just seeing a virtual camera.
Yep, we're just seeing a virtual.
Has
Oh,
the
there we go.
virtual camera been started?
I just did
I see,
that. Thanks.
see a mixer.
Okay, so here's my webcam, and I've set up a bunch of scenes in here. So here is my iPhone, and it's just plugged in USB to my Mac, and so that can move around as a document camera.
Yep.
You can screen scrape any other window on your machine. So here's a PDF of a score. I'm designing this for music lessons.
Yep.
So here's a multi-view that you could see me, and maybe this iPhone could point at the piano keyboard so you could see fingerings, and we can change the size of those, put them side by side, however you want to lay those out.
Really-
This is all free tools in OBS.
Really bad latency on your audio, however.
And that's always the problem.
As
I've
my
always had with
machine is
OBS.
falling down with the virtual camera.
Okay,
Go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say you want to maybe we'll work on that together offline if you don't mind.
I'm working on a write-up, and I'll put that in Discord when it's ready.
That's great. Tim?
I was just going to say that sync issue is always the problem that I have with OBS. One of the reasons I've gone away from it.
It's just a lot of CPU power, and yeah, figuring out how to tighten that back up is the key. Mickey?
CPO, Jeff, what CPU are you using, Jeff? Francis?
MacBook Pro 2016.
So it's
Because
yeah,
you're
it's-
you're dead on sync now.
i7. Yeah, well, I've killed OBS and gone back to the ATEM Mini Pro.
Right. And,
But running Zoom and OBS and Safari and all that.
Again, this is why the ATEM Mini Pro is so, or the ATEM Mini even is so useful, is because of that. Yeah, I think we're going to see some. I think we're all going to see some new solutions in this area by September, and hopefully we'll get to see them here and talk about it. Anyway, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to, like, for Greg, like, yeah, we could do so much with free tools. I mean, it won't necessarily be as easy if we had like dedicated tools for what we're trying to do, but there are ways around things. I mean, yeah.
Because teachers don't have money. And the schools are not going to pay for any of this stuff. So we have to figure out some way to do it that's not going to break us.
And encouragement. Sorry, money is only a small percentage of the problem. Attitude and challenge of acceptance is still the psychology of this.
But I think us making it easy for people to do is part of it. Is just lowering that ramp so that teachers who want to do it are able to get this done. I think I think teachers want to be successful. We just have to figure out a way to help them be successful. So we'll keep on working on this, and I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to start moving really fast because we're running out of time. How long do you think before moisture from your breath impacts the mic in the mask? This is when I was putting in the mask. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would say like that would highly depend on the microphone you're using. Like standard lavalier mics, especially the ones like say from Countryman, those things are waterproof. So they're you wipe them down with isopropyl alcohol afterwards, and you'll be good.
I'm going to keep going here. Next question is from Stephen Kimbrough. For teachers, how are you supported by the school district or the state with days before showtime? What are the platforms that you can or must use? Do you feel supported at all by the state? I guess is the question. Yeah, go ahead, Emily and Greg.
So I don't feel totally supported. I mean, my district's doing the best they can. The districts that I support are doing the best they can. But like I said in the last one, they can't even buy the cleaning products we need to go back into the buildings right now. So we're delayed on that. But the things that we're being forced to use are like the thing that I've talked about in the past about having the IT department and the teachers separated. So, the IT guys just build whatever the district purchases. So I have some districts that do things like buy into Microsoft, but don't let the students use Teams. And Teams is so powerful for the classroom now. It's kind of like, why? And it's because 4 years ago when they purchased it, it was Microsoft Classroom and it was trash, and then it didn't work the way it was supposed to, and then they rebuilt it and renamed it something else, and by then everybody had shut down on it. But like I service 8 different districts in a county in New York, and I have to do whatever the Olympics through technology I can possibly do, because some schools are Google, some are Microsoft, some use Schoology, some use Seesaw, some use Campus, Infinite Campus. It's just, or Canvas and Infinite Canvas. So you just have to jump and like make it work. I'm always hacking. Like, you just figure out a way to make it do what you want it to do, and then you backwards design it. So.
Greg, I'm going to do Greg, and then we're going to move on because we're running out of time.
But the problem is we're always having to end run, all these decisions that we're not making. And the thing is, we totally want to support management. We want to support them, but they have to stop making decisions without consulting us and taking our consultations seriously.
Yep.
We're the boots on the ground, not them.
Absolutely. Craig, how do you stop your camera setup from bouncing around? Looks like some cameras are on a flimsy desk. The big thing is to get the cameras off the desk. So what I try to do is find ways to mount the camera either from my ceiling or on a little stand behind it that have some way to hang it over. But it's really hard because the super small movement in the camera will show a lot on what you're doing. And so getting it disconnected from what you're touching is really the only solution. Lucas, really quickly, and then we're gonna move on to the next question.
Just a hack, if you can really get it from the desk, you can try to at least mount it on the desk, but on a very kind of brick or something heavy. So that will at least help a little bit.
A little bit. Michael asks, a lot of music lessons happen at stores. Many have discontinued lessons, no central control, no employee trained on online education, no quality control as everyone has different gear. Some louder instruments require multiple mics for voice, complicated, expensive. Comments, please. Music lessons, hard. But an opportunity for those who have figured it out. Like if you figure it out, there's a scalability to it that no one, if you're really good at it, there's nobody, there's not as much competition. Go ahead, Jeff.
2 microphones, one for talking, one a little farther away for instruments, and the ability to mute your talking mic. I helped out a trumpet professor with this and just did a simple analog mixer that he could reach over and mute his trumpet mic, because the gain on his talking mic needed to be much louder, and he didn't want to blow that away. I mean, the gain on his voice mic needed to be louder, and he didn't want to blow that away when he played the trumpet, so he just mutes that and then unmutes to talk in between. So that's a good idea to get started.
And I will say that, I think there is a big market right now for people who want to figure this out. It's worth investing in some hardware. I know I would pay right now for my daughter to be able to take her piano lessons again. Her teacher is not technologically savvy, really good piano teacher, but not the one that will be able to do this. And I would pay right now someone to drop in for half an hour lessons remotely and teach her piano. So next question is Brandon. To the educators, what are the ways that we can help you and students? Where are you feeling there are gaps in where we can set up in our local communities? Yeah, go ahead, Kent and Michael. Then Michael.
I think a lot of it is practice that we're going to need to be doing. Like for the next week, because I'm helping out some of my colleagues. And that's the thing, just practice. And in fact, I contacted Tim last week and that's what he's doing too. So I don't know if there's any way that people could just say, hey, I'm open for 20 minutes and practice rooms and polling and stuff like that in Zoom. So that's one thing, is that people just need the practice before it goes live.
Yep. Michael,
Yeah.
And then real quick.
Yeah, 100% the practice. The other thing I'd say on stuff like media production is part of that practice is comfort, but the other thing is I was talking to a lot of Berkeley faculty recently, and there's just this overwhelming feeling of how much longer it takes to do things like produce and edit a video. And I think this group has been really good about this idea of producing things live and minimizing the editing. And so I think a lot of this is just when you're helping someone, how can you help them accomplish their task that is 80% as good as what could be there in a reasonable amount of time, not much effort. My plan for the fall is use an ATEM, use a mix pre, but like virtually no editing, right? Maybe a trim. But just making sure that you can manage that cycle on a week-to-week basis as classes go on.
And I really think that, again, as I talk to teachers, my big thing is learn how to use Keynote or PowerPoint or slides really well, record, just do a screen record or a record if those platforms do it. Don't try to figure out how to edit it. Once you're tired of that and you're way ahead and it's working, then move to iMovie or to something else there. Go ahead, Sky, real quick.
Just to Jeffrey's point, I really want to smash a fallacy though. Nothing is free, because what you're doing, all of your prep is on the front end for a live experience versus doing all of your capturing and editing in post-production. But volumetrically, it's the same 100 pounds. 100 pounds of feathers is 100 pounds. It's not lighter just because it's feathers.
Well, and what I will say is that this conversation that we're having is a lot easier to generate than a content, and every time you turn, and that's why you want to try to keep it short. And I would much rather record little videos on how to do something than try to teach a class on it, because it's way easier to let people, I figure out how to say it quickly. They can rewind and look at it, and then we can discuss it, but I think I believe it's a more effective way to do it.
But it's still not free.
No, it's not free. Brian, and a lot of when we say that there are better tools, these are free. For teachers, you do have to look at whether it's OBS or something else, you have to value your time. So things cost money, but just take a look at how much less time you have in the day because you're using a whole bunch of free apps that only partially work. Brian Anderson says, I just learned about Aloha by a Swedish company, Elk. It looks really interesting for music teachers. Has anyone used this or accessed the beta, Jeff?
I've applied for the beta, haven't heard back yet. As I understand it, it is a hardware device that takes your audio in. This is for music collaboration. So along the lines of Jam Kazam and Jack Trip and all those other ones that don't work because of too much latency. This one is a Ethernet device that is audio into Ethernet. And so you plug it directly into your ISP. And so it guarantees 1 millisecond latency from audio in to Ethernet. It says nothing about the pipeline from you to another person, but it's just trying to reduce that side of things. They would love for you to be on fiber and close together.
Very good. Roscoe and then Greg, real quick.
I was going to say, the demo looks absolutely amazing with no explanation what's behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, it says here that over Ethernet and 5G networks.
Okay.
So that's a killer for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, everybody. We run a little heavy, and I got a production in 55 minutes. So we're gonna peel out here. Remember that tomorrow we're live again. So we'll be talking about education from 9 to 11-ish. It's a little bit, it's a soft ending if there's a lot of questions. So we still open at 6 if people want to get in that early. We still have general questions from 7 to 9, but from 9 to 11, if you're an educator and you want to keep this conversation going, this one just heats up every time. And so we'll have a lot more to talk about tomorrow. And tell your friends if they're in education that we'd love to have them for that conversation. And otherwise we'll move on. Mickey, hit it.
Chris and Wendy, I have officially adopted both of you as my aunt and uncle.
Very good. So tomorrow's education. Sunday is just kind of the general hour, and then we'll send out announcements on Sunday for next week. It should be a lot of fun. All right, everybody, have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow. All right.
Thanks, Mickey. Thanks, Mickey. We love you.